Hello all, welcome to the pre-show. If you are watching this live, then welcome aboard. If you're watching it on the replay, you can probably fast forward 15 minutes or so and you'll be much better off. I'm still sitting here in the dark. I don't even have my headphones in yet. We need to fix that. Let's do that right now. Let's first get some lights on. All four lights. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 lights. There are 4 lights. Here we go. And behind me, there we are. What a difference. I can indeed see clearly now. The lights are on. Okay, let's see if I can hear myself, which will be the next important step in this entire process. Check, check, check. Turn me up. There we go. Now we're doing something. And what else is going on? Let's see. Is this on a network? Is it? Is it on a network? It is on a network, which means that it can be my keynote. There we are. Hello, chat room. If you are watching live, I'm watching the chat room. That's on professormesser.com/live. And I see that. So that works. That's all good. How about a camera check? Would be good. Does any of this work? Really? Well, that works. That works. That works. That works. Head in the picture, head in the picture. Phone number, blah, blah, blah. That's all good right there. That is all good. All right. I could probably put some stuff up on my screen. Socrative, get logged into that. Let's get logged in. I'll put up the first question for those of you that are already in the Socrative. Let's start a quiz. Security Plus. Teacher paste. Disable the student names. Start. Oh, you folks are already in there. So now you should see something on your screen. Let's change the view here. Let's get a recording started here. So I got minimum that. Probably need to start a recording down here to the side of me. Let's eject, eject. Eject, eject, eject. What's using that? What am I using that is using that? Let's close that. Oh, I know what it is. It's my compressor. Compressor is still running. Thank you, nice machine. All right. And we got SSD on the top, SSD on the bottom. Green is good. Green will go out in a moment. And down here. And will it go out? Go dark. Come on. There you go. And the other one. And there we go. It's alive. And I can see the preview and the main are running there. So let's start those up. One less thing to worry about. Okay. What else is going on? What am I missing? We need to bring up GTS so I can show you cool stuff there. I need to bring up course notes so I can show you cool stuff there. Security Plus. Security Plus. Security Plus. Is that what we're doing today? I think it is. Security Plus. And there's the course notes. Big and beautiful. Big and beautiful. I like it. There's a nice gentleman. I don't know who that is. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they're doing here. Yeah, what's the deal with the countdown clock? It's just annoying at times. It doesn't have the right time on it. It's a caching thing. What's it saying now? Is it saying some dumb amount? It says 9 minutes on mine. Huh. Weird. Mine says 9. So here's mine. I'll show you. Right here. Which is correct. That's about right with the thing. So I'll know what that's about. Maybe you are actually 30 minutes behind. Maybe you are literally 30 minutes in the past right now. It could happen. I think it's a caching problem. I think it's actually when it's caching through my reverse proxy is where the problem is on your side. Let's do this. I will purge. I'm going to empty all my caches. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? And now let's see what happens. It looks the same on my side. So now you can try your side and see if it's the same thing. Let's hear how this sounds. We haven't even done a check of how things sound. Oh, don't type the wrong thing in. That's my little tip for you today. Don't type the wrong thing in. Test 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, turn it down. Wait a second. How things sound. Well, it sounds fine. Oh, I'm glad you can't see that. It's when you type the wrong thing in. It's like being in that presentation and suddenly, yeah, well, it's in 8 minutes. So the answer is 8 minutes. Just ignore the technology that we put behind these things. It's a little warm in here too. Where's the temperature controls? We need temperature. Yeah, let's make it cooler. 77. Let's try that. Of course, that will be too cold because that's how it works. Do I have everything in order? The answer is I need some tea. I have. Today, we opted for hot chocolate. We have hot chocolate. That will get me through my day. I did not take a voice thing. I'll be right back. Okay, I got a vocal zone. So now you get to hear me do this in a vocal zone. That's annoying. I will mute. See, 45 minutes. It worked. Okay, so it didn't work. So what you're saying is I need a different countdown clock. That is just not right. And you're probably right. There are some that I can get. That one is free. But there is a nice one I've been looking at that I have to pay money for. But I think it's worth it. If you have somebody working on it that can fix these problems. For something like this anyway. It just makes sense. Let's put live is live. Okay. Why is it that when I'm doing this, that's when all the interesting tweets come up that I want to drill down on? I don't really see anything during the day that compels me that way. But when I get here, I need to see that. Yeah, the countdown clock for the Linux Plus security group. The study group will be a very long clock. You guys would be killing me. Okay, there is no audio for those of you wondering what in the world's going on. Is it just frozen? I need to put one of those things up that says buffering, like the what chat show is that? It's the Kevin Pollak chat show. Thank you, Google, for firing that synapse. Okay. And for those of you sending the private messages in chat, I'm sorry I can't respond to it at the moment because we're trying to, got a thing going on. But afterwards, you can send me a note and we can chat. We can talk. We can type back and forth to each other. What do I need? La 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 la. I got my monthly technical support call of the day just before we started. I was working at a place for almost 7 years, and I quit in February. And whenever there's a big problem, a ticket with tech support that someone needs to work directly with the customer to resolve the issue, needs a little more handholding, needs a little more help in the field, they call the local systems engineer. And they have called me dutifully once a month to help with a hot ticket. I've almost felt like I should be calling somebody. Like, well, should I? Oh, let me, who is it? No, never mind. And now since February, now I don't know the customers. Now some of course I know, but the ones who are having problems are usually folks that aren't the larger customers anyway. Okay. How are we on time? I got 3 minutes and I still got a vocal zone in my mouth, as you can probably tell. And now I'm looking for places to ditch it. I don't want to stick it under this desk. This is a nice desk. And it wouldn't fit anywhere under here with all the gum. Oh, I do have something. I'm going to go into high gear. So this is me trying to get rid of a vocal zone 3 minutes before we're live. That's compelling live stream right there. I do this for you people. Your emails this week have been awesome. I've got the most amazing, remarkable. I've got very good emails this week. Don't get me wrong. I had some very nice notes this week. But I get crazy notes. I mean, crazy notes like it's a little bit weird. I mean, crazy notes. Because the internet's a big place and people, unfortunately, aren't taking care of themselves. And I get to read about it. I'm going to put these together in a book and publish them someday. This looks remarkably neat right here. You can't see behind it. I think that's the thing. You can kind of see I got a box over here. There's a cable there. What is that cable? I think it's power. Too much stuff. Oh, we got a minute. 1 minute, Mr. Sinatra. Okay, I got to do something with this vocal zone now. Now we're at this point where we have to make a decision. This is the worst pre-show ever. Who would sit? Why are you here? We will get started in less than a minute, I assure you. Mic's not on. Sorry about that. All right, let's get some things ready to go here. All right, I got rid of it with no seconds to spare. Let's do a study group, everyone. Hello and welcome to the October 2015 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. This is my monthly study group where I ask you questions that should help you with your Security Plus exam studies, and hopefully you can answer. We do this all online. It's all interactive. If you're watching this live, you can actually participate and put in your answer, and we'll see how you did. If you're watching it on the replay, you unfortunately don't have that interactive let's click on things, but you can still follow along and see how you do as well. We've got a lot to go over this month. I've got so much different questions to go through. I sit there and go through all of the things that you send me in your registrations, and I try to make these. I'm also watching this live watching the chat room live on professormesser.com/live. And anywhere on the website, you can actually click into the live event chat. And I'm watching it right now. We've been going back and forth, and people have been making fun of me during the pre-show. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, simply rewind and watch that really gripping pre-show. It is you wonder how any of this works at all. I'm able to do these live events thanks to you. I appreciate your support throughout the month. We have our study group videos, of course, are all available to watch absolutely free, my entire Security Plus course, but there's an offline version of this as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter and on YouTube by typing in professormesser.com/anything/Twitter /YouTube/Google /Instagram. You get the idea. Just put a slash, and then if you think I'm on that thing, you'll find me there. Just type it in. There's also 10% off your test. These vouchers are available thanks to our friends at GTS Learning. You can find out more at professormesser.com/vouchers. As I mentioned, I'm able to do this because you support the site. You're so great with purchasing the course notes, and some people like to take these videos offline. So you can, of course, purchase the videos as well. You'll get not only the videos themselves, but MP3 audio, although you can also purchase the MP3 audio separately. If you want to put this in your car and listen on your way to work and back. And of course, my course notes come with this as well. If you want to learn more about that, it's at professormesser.com/getsecplus, GETSECPLUS. So let's go through some of these things that we're going to do today. I mentioned I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer. And you may be thinking, how do I do that? Well, you just yell really loudly and I will hear you. And you have to put it into Socrative. So make sure you go to Socrative.com, pop open a new browser window, click the student login, and go to room Professor Messer. Make sure you spell it right or you will be the only one in there. It's Professor with an O, Messer with an E. I guess there's E's and O's both of those places. In any case, just type it in properly and you'll end up in the right place. And if you do that, you'll see something that looks a little bit like this. And it'll ask you, how long have you been studying for your Security Plus certification? And you can see people already in here. They're typing some things in. They're answering those pieces. There are also apps available for your Android, your iOS, your Windows mobile device. And you can, of course, have it on a separate device. And all you have to do is sit on the screen. And every time I put in the question, it will pop open the question automatically and you can answer. And that's how we're going to tell how we do today. So make sure you go to professormesser.com and answer the question, which is this: how long have you been studying for your Security Plus certification? That's Socrative.com, student login, Professor Messer is the room name. And then you'll see this, and I get to go through those pieces. This is a pretty interesting thing to work on. So I put all these questions in here throughout the month, and all you have to do is click, and you can see interactively, I get to see how you're answering. And this is pretty much how you would see a normal distribution on my study groups. Usually we're studying for the first 3 to 6 months on this material. If you're more like me, you're probably down here to over a year's worth of study. That's me. It takes me 9 months to a year, usually, sometimes over, to study for a certification. So I'm a slow learner, I guess. And some people already have their Security Plus certification. If you're listening today, sometime during this first hour of the event, I will give you a special code that you can send to me, and that will give you a way to get continuing education units from this. So there is that. So you got that. So you can see how we did. Less than 3 months, about half of us are less than 3 months. Welcome to this world of Security Plus and trying to figure out all of these different things. 3 to 6 months, 11%, and we kind of have this interesting curve after that. So I have some questions for you today that really do fit into that first 3 to 6 months, or really if you're studying for Security Plus at all. I'm getting these questions from the Security Plus course objectives, the exam objectives. These are created by CompTIA. They are on the CompTIA website. If you do not have the exam objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice before you take your exam. Make sure you have these exam objectives and you read through them. This is the SY0401 Security Plus exam. That SY0401 is the exam number for the Security Plus exam. This is a single exam, so you go in, you don't have to take multiple exams to get this certification. It's a single time you go in and take it. It's 90 minutes long. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions. And of course, the passing score for this is a 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. Which is a little confusing, isn't it? But that's kind of the way it works. Their scale is an 800-point scale, and you have to get 650 points. Or it's from 100 to 900, and you have to get 750 points. There's probably a PhD in statistics who knows exactly why you do this. The rest of us just go along with it, I suppose. You get both multiple choice questions and performance-based questions on this. So there are questions that are not exactly multiple choice. It might be fill in the blank. It might be a matching. It might be a ranking from highest to lowest, or from an ascending or descending, those types of things. So it just depends on the exam. But if you know the content, it doesn't matter how they ask the question, you'll know the answer to the question. So don't get too wrapped up in the multiple choice versus performance based. If you know everything in the exam objectives, you will pass your exam, I assure you. So let's figure out what you do know. Let's ask some questions already. Let's get this thing started. And I have a question for you. Here it is. Which of these would best describe a security vulnerability? And if I click the button on my screen, you will see that question come up in your Socrative. So you can go, don't answer in the chat room. And of course, don't Google it. We want to try to figure this out on our own. So go to the Socrative.com, to the student login, go to the Professor Messer room, and see if you can answer this. There are a number of you in there right now who are working on these things. I have a number of options for you, though. So I'm not just giving you an open-ended, which would best describe a security vulnerability. Your possible answers are buggy software that provides unintended access to private information. Would it be malware that encrypts all user files on a storage device? Would it be a firewall with an implicit deny rule? Would it be using a WAF with all web applications, or using a VPN tunnel to transfer plain text data? One of these would describe a security vulnerability. This is where you get into, especially in the Security Plus exam, some very specific definitions. And this is very common in the Security Plus world. You saw a little bit of this in the networking world. If you come from networking or you've done your Network Plus, Security Plus has a very specific set of a nomenclature. It's sort of like chemistry, where everything has to be stated in a very particular way. So there are differences, or really a very specific set of characteristics around the term security vulnerability. And you have to understand what those are. So if you think you know the answer, go out to Socrative.com and type in what you think that answer might be. In this particular case, I'm only asking you for one particular answer here. On your exam, you could be asked for to answer multiple answers. It might tell you to pick 2 or pick 3, and there will be check boxes. But in this particular example, I'm only looking for one of these, and really only one of these does apply towards this concept of a security vulnerability. Let's see how we did with this. A number of you have gone in and done some voting already. So let's click the How Do We Do button, and you can see we have a vast majority of you, 83% of you, say it's buggy software that provides unintended access to private information. A few of you have said on the B side that this is their malware that encrypts all user files on a storage device. 10% said a firewall with an implicit deny rule. Nobody said using a WAF. 3% said using a VPN. So is it really buggy software that provides unintended access to private information? There's only one way to find out, and that's if we look at security vulnerability and what it really is. And this really surrounds this concept of security risk, this risk associated with an event that could possibly allow people to gain access to your assets. And usually these are digital assets, but of course it could be somebody coming into a door and stealing something. That's a security event as well. This is where, whenever you're creating your risk profile for your organization, you're putting together a list of where the problems could be. Well, we don't have a guard at this door, or this particular access to the server is provided to anybody with a key card. We don't limit who gets to go into the room, and you can make a list of those. And as I mentioned, it could be physical or it could be technical. It could be a door lock or it could be a firewall. Just depends on what the risk happens to be and how you want to fix this. So this brings us to the concept of a security vulnerability. This is where there is a weakness. There's a problem with something. There is an issue that's going to that could potentially cause a security event to occur. But it doesn't necessarily mean that one has already happened. What this really means is that you have a door that's unlocked. Doesn't mean anybody went in the door, but it means that the door is not one that doesn't have a lock associated with it, or there's a no firewall rule that would prevent something from happening. It doesn't mean that somebody is actually taking advantage of that problem with the firewall, but it's there. Especially with applications. We know every month Microsoft produces their big patch day of the month, and in that patch list are a number of security vulnerabilities, which are problems with software that someone could potentially use to gain access to a server or gain access to data or cause a denial of service or something. It would cause something to happen, but it's certainly something that is unintended. That's not the way that application is supposed to work. These vulnerabilities, as I mentioned, on their own aren't a problem. It's when people take advantage of the vulnerability that's a problem. The exploitation of the vulnerability. And those are the two terms you need to be absolutely familiar with. A vulnerability is one thing, an exploit is something completely different. That's when somebody takes advantage of the vulnerability. Make sure you understand those two pieces when it comes to understanding the terms, because when you speak with other security professionals, they're going to use these terms, threats and vulnerabilities and exploits, and you need to make sure that you are using them in the proper terms for all of those. So if you are one of these people that answered right here, that A is buggy software that provides unintended access to private information, now, that is what we're looking at as a vulnerability. A is the correct answer. You would have gotten that one absolutely right. But keep in mind that when you're looking at these, malware that encrypts all user files on a storage device, that's not a vulnerability. That's something that's already exploiting a vulnerability in your system or access to your system. A firewall with an implicit deny rule in itself is not a security vulnerability, especially if it's denying things. It's hard to say that that's a security vulnerability. Nobody chose WAF, but using a WAF is a good thing. It's not a security vulnerability. And of course, using a VPN tunnel to transfer plain text data, it's not really a problem either. VPN tunnels generally are designed so that you can transfer plain text data, except it's encrypted when it goes through the tunnel. So that's a very good choice. So if you chose A, buggy software, you got it absolutely right. Well done with that one. So let's keep this thought process going with vulnerabilities and the concepts behind them. And let's have a look at another set of questions, this one dealing with fuzzing. And again, no mentioning this one in the chat room. And of course, don't discuss it or Google it or try to figure that out. You want to list out these things. Which of these would best describe fuzzing? And let's look at our list of things that this could be. It could be escaping a web application to perform your own SQL query. It could be running a series of vulnerability scans against a web server. Could it be overloading a network service from many different IP addresses simultaneously? Would it be creating random entropy for encrypted tunnels? Or would it be sending random information to an application input? One of these is fuzzing. So that's where you want to go through this list and figure out which one is fuzzing. If you think you know, don't talk about it in the chat room or Google it. You should go to Socrative.com, click on the student login link, and go to the Professor Messer room. And you'll see this question sitting there, and you can answer live. Unless you're on the replay, of course. Folks on the replay, you won't see anything in the room. You'll go there and nothing's happening because it's a replay. It's one of those things where you do have to be here live to participate live with the questions. But if you are watching on the replay, just make a note of it. Figure out which one it is. And when we go through the list of things, you'll be able to tell this as well. Fuzzing. Fuzzing is interestingly, a real definition. It's a real term. It's absolutely used in security. I get a number of questions sent to me in email every month saying, hey, you use this term fuzzing. That's not real. Or you use this term with the A+. When I'm talking about the defragmentation process on your hard drive, and putting everything together on there, we want to have files that are contiguous, not continuous, but contiguous. And I have folks send me emails complaining of my spelling error and that I'm saying it wrong. So that's one of these things. I'm not saying it wrong. This is not a spelling error. We really are talking about fuzzing. It can't all be just tight people talking about security vulnerabilities and exploits. We have fuzzing. How do we do with this? How did we do with fuzzing? Well, we're sort of got a mix here. I've got double digits. Most of you, the majority of you, have said sending random information to an application input, but 22% of you said overloading a network service from many different IP addresses simultaneously. So it's got to be one of these, single digits for all the rest. And what you should be able to do is each one of these things does describe something. If you really want extra credit for yourself, because the points don't matter, at least not in the study group, you should be able to go through each one of these things and name what it is. So that's one of those very interesting ways to work through that. Let's see what the fuzzing is. What is this? Well, look at the cute bear. Of course it's fuzzing. This is when you take a bunch of random stuff and send it to an application just to see what happens. You may hear this referred to as fault injecting or robustness testing or syntax testing. That says negative testing. If you could see this without my big head being in the way, there it is. Negative testing. The negative testing is an interesting term. Syntax testing, these all really describe the same thing, which is fuzzing and being able to work through trying to find a hole in an application. This is something you should be doing in normal application quality assurance. People in QA should be just sending all kinds of nonsense into an application to see what kind of results come back. And if the application is written well, then normal error messages will come back saying that it doesn't understand the input that you provided. But of course, some applications may be looking for some very detailed and very specific kinds of input. And in those particular cases, it'd be good to have this fuzzing there to see what happens. There was an interesting project where this came from, 1988. University of Wisconsin, Operating System Utility Program Reliability. Professor Barton Miller created the fuzz generator. It's a fun thing to play around with. If you can download some fuzz generators. In my fuzzing video, I demonstrate fuzzing. I bring up one of these fuzzing engines. You can download one that's ready to go with an application that does have vulnerabilities, and it will run the fuzzing test, just random tests against it to see what happens. And just does it over and over and over again. Here's the download for the CERT Basic Fuzzing Framework, my BFF. And you get it at cert.org/download/BFF. OMG. And it's fun to play around with, and you can see me do it. I think it runs in a virtual machine, or I was running it in a virtual machine. I don't remember which one I think it does come as a VM, which is great. You can bring it up in your VM, click a button, and off it goes. And you can watch the fuzzing take place. It's really remarkable, the process it goes through. So let's see how we did. So if we go back to our list, escaping a web application to perform your own SQL query, well, that would be a SQL injection. So that's not fuzzing. Running a series of vulnerability scans against a web server is vulnerability scanning. So that's not fuzzing. Overloading a network service from many different IP addresses simultaneously is a distributed denial of service attack, not fuzzing and not fuzzy. Creating random entropy for encrypted tunnels, something that's kind of done automatically, and that's just the process of creating randomization so it can encrypt the tunnels. And finally, sending random information to an application input. If you answered E, 66% of you got it absolutely right. Congratulations. For those of you in the chat room, nope, no breaks. There's sort of a break. We do this for an hour, and then we have an after show where I'll take your phone calls. But there's no break in between. We are completely live. We are going this. Yeah, you could pause, but if you pause, you'll be behind the rest of us in answering the questions. So just go quick. You'll be fine. Just run away, do your thing, come back, and you won't miss a thing. Because I have more questions for you, like this one. Which of these best describes AES? AES. One of these is AES. I didn't give you much to go on there. I just gave you an abbreviation. So no Googling. That's way too easy. I have now prevented. I have now said, no, you may not Google. And that's all it really takes. So I'm sure Google's now broken on your machine. The possible answers are, is this a symmetric encryption cipher? Is it a wireless authentication protocol? Is it part of the WEP standard, or is it used in out-of-band key exchange? One of these things best describes AES. Hey, somebody knows. Isn't that great? Did your Google stop working? Joe's Google's not working. It's my mere mention of wanting to stop Google has prevented it. I'm sure the folks at Google would not be happy. There'll be somebody knocking on the door very quickly. Hey, turn Google back on. So one of these best describes AES. There is a lot of questions on the exam that deal with acronyms, probably more so than the Network Plus, and this is one of them. And it's one that a lot of people sent me these registrations that I do. They ask, can you do more questions about this topic? Well, this is one of those topics, probably top 3 that people want. So we will see how we did with this one. I'm going to take a peek. In fact, I get to peek over here and see what that's about. So let's see how we did. Got a number of you. We're now in here now. You guys are answering these questions now. You must be Googling fast because you're answering very quickly now. I'm just assuming at this point, of course you're going to Google. Let's see how you did though. Maybe you didn't. Well, we know not all of you are. Some of you are very good. Must be, because we're getting different answers. If everybody Googled, everybody'd be on the same answer. 56% of you said it's a symmetric encryption cipher. 29% said is wireless authentication protocol. 14% said it's part of the WEP standard. And 2% said it's used in out-of-band key exchange, whatever that is. So let's see what AES is. It stands for the Advanced Encryption Standard. Here's a little picture of what one of the processes that occurs in AES. It is one that is a U.S. federal government standard. It's part of the FIPS standard, FIPS 197 that came out in 2001. And it did literally take 5 years to standardize on this. The federal government really doesn't mess around when it comes to secrets. So that's pretty much any government, I think, is how that works. And so they really spent a lot of time to find the right standard, because there were many that they had to choose from. And then they really tested it. They got the best cryptographers in the room, like Joan and Vincent, and really went through how are we going to create a standard that really is cryptographically secure. We don't want 2, 3 years down the road, 5 years, 10 years down the road to suddenly realize there's a limitation to this. And now all of the things that we did have private are not really working so well. So that's where this came from. It's a 128, 192, and 256-bit block cipher. And it's used in WPA2, interestingly enough. There's that wireless connection that's there. So if you are using WPA2, there's a version of not WPA, because WPA uses TKIP, but WPA2 uses AES. The AES is the encryption part of WPA2, and that's why WPA2 is just so good. That's why it's so secure, because it's using a very secure encryption standard to do this. So that's one of those that does make a big difference when you're looking at encryption. So if we look at these and look at our answers for this, 57% said it's a symmetric encryption cipher. Indeed, a symmetric encryption cipher. Well done with that. And we're using it as a symmetric encryption cipher with wireless because, as you know, symmetric encryption ciphers are relatively fast, relatively easy to calculate compared to asymmetric encryption ciphers. So that's why we use them when doing encryption over these network links. A wireless authentication protocol, it is not 802.1x, which is really an authentication protocol for wireless and wired and others. And And if it is not part of the WEP standard, it is part of the WPA2 standard. And it's not used in out-of-band key exchange. Out-of-band key exchange is when you exchange keys not over the network. So I would call you on the phone and tell you what the key is, or I would hand you a briefcase that has the key inside. That sounds a lot cooler. The actual security jobs aren't quite as cool as that. And that's the way it works anyway when you're working through these. So if you answered A, symmetric encryption cipher, you got this one. Absolutely correct. Well done. There is a lot on the exam. These AES is just one example of it, but I've taken everything from all of my videos and I've put them into one single place, one succinct, consolidated view of all of the Security Plus material. And you can find it in my Security Plus course notes. This is a 35-page PDF. It has everything inside of it. And I mean, I stuck everything inside of it. It has everything that's talking about devices. We've got a breakdown. I'm just going to scroll through. Here's DMZ information, VLANs, NATing, all of the diagrams, all of the charts, all of the bullets, all the port numbers, everything that is in my course is in these course notes. I made it so that you wouldn't have to write down everything or that I wouldn't have to hand you every slide because there are hundreds and hundreds of slides. I've taken everything and just consolidated into a single place. This is also a great way to support the website. A lot of you have asked me, very graciously have said, can I contribute and just donate? Well, I don't take donations. I want to give you something in return for what you're giving me. So you can go to professormesser.com/securitycn and purchase the course notes. It's a great way to study before you take your exam. It doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace your videos, but it's a good way to have everything in one place. And it's a PDF file, so you can put it on all of your devices, on your laptop, on your tablets, on your mobile devices, however you want to access that information. I've made it very easy for you. Thank you for supporting what we do here at Professor Messer. You can learn more about the Security Plus course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. Well, there is more questions to ask. And I don't put out my slides. I don't provide my slides. So those in the chat room, and somebody asked me this morning in an email, hey, can I get your slides? But I don't provide my slides. Why should you? Why should you deal with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of slides? I really literally copied and pasted everything I could find from my slides and put them in the course notes. That's where you should go. It's a great place to go for those things. Very easy to work with on those. So let's do more questions. That's really the fun part. Let's answer one of these questions like this. Why would you need to calculate the ALE? Why would I need to calculate the ALE? That's a really good question. Let's find out what my possible options might be. Maybe that would give me an idea of what an ALE is. It's not an ale. That's something else. I guess you could call it the ale, but when I hear ale, I think of something else that is brewed, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something different. It's one of these four things. Why would I calculate it? Would it be to determine the annual storage requirements? Would it be to estimate annual data transfer costs? Would it be used to properly size a disaster recovery hot site? Or would it be to estimate the cost of security events for the year? One of these is ALE. So now we need to know what that could possibly be. If you think you know, go to Socrative.com, go to the student logins, green button that's right there, and see what you think it is. Go to the Professor Messer room. Make sure you type in Professor Messer room properly with the right spelling. I'm able to create aliases and purchase alternative domain names so that people can just type in anything and get to me. I have some odd spellings of my name that you can use to get to me. But for this one, you have to be absolutely correct. Make sure you type it in PROFESSORMESSER. And I don't care what you call me. Just type it in properly so you can go to the room and know why you would calculate the ALE. This is one of the few things on the Security Plus exam you actually have to calculate, or at least understand the calculation with those pieces. It's a pretty interesting set of algorithms you have to know. And it's not complicated. Security Plus exam, you have to know addition, subtraction, maybe division, multiplication to some degree. But this one is an important thing to consider, especially if you're in security. A lot of things dealing with security are not the things most people think of, because on television and in the movies, the hacker is running vulnerability scan, and then they're taking advantage and exploiting a vulnerability, and then they're in a system. But most of the time, you're setting policy, and you're setting up your infrastructure and your security strategy around the policy. It's a policy job. It's not really one where you're dealing a lot with real-time hackers or I love the hacker certifications. Okay, that's very sexy and it's very interesting to have a name like that. But the reality of a security job is you'll be doing things like calculating the ALE. Let's see how we did with calculating the ALE. What would it be? Well, we're kind of got a big one here. We've got a mixture of different things. 74% said it would be to estimate the cost of security events for the year. And it could be 14%. So you said we need to size a disaster recovery hot site. We need to properly size that. And only 7% said estimating annual data transfer costs or determining annual storage requirements. So what would it be? Well, we're calculating risk. That's what this is. We want to find out how much money these security problems are going to cost us throughout the year. Now, this is really an estimate. We really don't know for sure, but we can make some guesses, some educated guesses from this. So we want to create and determine what the likelihood of a particular security event might be. So we'll take, for instance, I'm in Florida. This is the worldwide headquarters of Messer Studios. So I have to think about storms. I have to think about hurricanes. I live in a part of Florida that is relatively high. In Florida, everything's kind of low. There are no mountains in Florida. There's very few large hills. But as far as the bottom of the water, it's not going to be hitting the studios. So, pardon me, there's a concern though, and I have to think about if there is a storm, I could lose power. There could be some localized flooding. There might be wind damage. So in all of those things, I need to figure out how often is something like that going to happen. Am I going to get one of those a year? Is it going to be one every 2 years, one every 5 years, one every 10 years? It just depends. So now I have to figure out if there is an event like this, how much is that going to cost me? If I lose power for a day, how much money is that going to be from a security perspective? If somebody steals my laptop, if somebody breaks in and steals everything we have in here, is that an issue? So, of course, we build security into it. There are alarms, there are cameras, there are hardened doors. There's things you can do to prevent that, but you do have to calculate if it does happen. If they get through all of those things, how much money is that going to be? And then we need to calculate, if I know how many times it's going to happen and I know how much money it's going to be, I can put those two things together and know in a year I can expect this number of events to occur, and here's how much money that would cost. Maybe this would happen 10 times a year. That'd be a very bad hurricane season. I get hit 10 times. I can guess that each time it's going to cost me a certain amount of money. I multiply those together and I get my annual loss expectancy, my ALE. And that is where I'm most interested because I have to set plans for this. Do I need to purchase insurance? Do I need to have a collection of money set aside for an event like this? Do I need to have somebody on speed dial that can get me a generator or that can get me replacement equipment? If this occurs, I need to know what the process is to go through and where those dollars are coming from. That is a pretty important part of this. So make sure that when you're calculating your ALE, you not only have the calculation and know what it's going to cost from a monetary perspective, but if any one of these things occur, what's the process? Again, it's one of those things you do as part of a security professional is setting policy and making determinations of what you do from a process and procedure perspective. Yes. So if you were one of the folks that answered, estimate the cost of the security events for the year, then you would have gotten that. 76% of you would have gotten that absolutely right. The answer is D. Nice job on that one. Let's do another question. I've got more. Let's go through these. I've got one that you will run into a lot more these days. This is not a topic that we had a lot of traction on when we talk about this topic, but it's one that has become more and more and more popular as the most recent years have gone by. And a lot of people are needing to do things with these particular topics these days. So the question is, in which of these would you expect to find data in use? It's another one of those terminology things we need to know, but it's an important set of terms because we will use this quite a bit whenever you're dealing with security. In fact, you may be purchasing equipment that deals with this. So in which of these would we expect to find data in use? And I want you to pick two, as you can see in Socrative. And the two options might be NAS, LAN, RAM, WAN, CPU, SAN. See how I did that? It's very cute of me. But now we have to go through this list, know what all these acronyms are, and see how they apply back to data in use. So you have about a 2 or 3 step process to answer this particular question. And remember, read the question up here, which says, in which of these would you expect to find data in use? Pick 2. Now, on your exam, you may be prompted to pick more than one, and it will tell you how many you need to pick. And it will, instead of having a radio button that will move as you answer the question, there'll be check boxes. And that'll be a visual cue to you so that you'll know, oh, they're expecting more than one answer on this one. And the test I took, I don't think I'm speaking to out of the non-disclosure agreement, but I think when I chose mine, if I didn't choose the right amount, it would tell me. Don't rely on that, though. It may not be that way anymore. You need to read the question and figure that out. And that's where we go through and try to figure these pieces out. Try to know what they are. Don't answer in the chat room, and don't Google data in use. What are you doing? Stop that. Get away from there. Don't do it. Google makes it way too easy, don't they? Yes, indeed. Fly. Something is afoot at the Circle K. There is a lot that you have to know about data in use, because you're going to be deciding where to spend your budget dollars for security. And data in use, especially lately, has been a very interesting set of topics, probably the last couple of years, as a matter of fact. Let's see how we did with data in use. And let's click the How Do We Do button. And we've got two that are big. So let's go with the two largest numbers. So we've got CPU and RAM are the two biggest ones. The next largest is NAS, and the next largest is SAN. And we've got WAN and LAN are down here in single digits at 7%. So what is this data in use concept? I want to give you the concept of what all the data is that you might run into from a security perspective. Let's first talk about data in transit. Data in transit is when data is moving across the network. This is a very specific term that we use in network security that describes where the data is so that we can then talk about how to protect it. So data in transit is as it's communicating across the network. So this is one where it's going between our components. It may be going outside of our building. It may be going across a wide area network. It may be going to another country. And so we have to think about how to secure it. And that's why most of the time we're talking about data in transit, we're talking about an encryption mechanism, whether it's a VPN, maybe it's SSL or TLS, same type of term. I put transport layer security here because that is the proper term. If you talk to a network security person, we're just so used to calling it SSL that we tend to use those two terms interchangeably, even though technically, yes, I know they're different. But whenever you read things from a security perspective, when you hear about a firewall that's doing SSL encryption, it's really talking about TLS because nobody's using SSL, but we've sort of used those interchangeably. I think I've made the point with that. Data in transit means it's on the network. So there's also data at rest. Data at rest means it's sitting on some storage device. It's in a SAN, it's in a NAS, it's on an SSD, it's on a hard drive, it's on a USB key. It's on something that is just sitting there. We're not accessing it necessarily, but it's there. It's on that device. It may have people accessing it or not. It might be a database that's stored somewhere, but it's on a storage component of some kind. So the way that you would protect it is to encrypt it. That, of course, isn't as easy as it sounds. I just made it, you just encrypt it. It's done. See how easy that was? Encrypting data at rest and providing access to that data by anybody who needs that access is a complicated thing. You can't just flip a switch and now the data is encrypted. We always talk about when people lose data, when large organizations lose this data that was on a disk and the data was not encrypted. Well, if it was a disk that was normally in the data center, well, that's pretty normal. If it's something that's mobile, though, almost everybody's doing some type of encryption, full disk encryption on their laptops and mobile devices these days. And if they aren't, they should be, because it's so easy now to do full disk encryption and still provide a way for you to access that information later. This is a way at data at rest. We could also do some very basic security. It doesn't have to be encryption. Maybe we just set an ACL. Maybe we set rights and permissions, share permissions, NTFS permissions, access through a firewall. Any way that you could allow or disallow access based on who really needs to gain access to that data. That's data at rest. But of course, we talked about in this question, data in use. That means we are actively using this information. It's in memory. It's in a CPU register. It's in a cache somewhere. It's not currently going across the network. It's not being stored somewhere on a storage device. We are doing calculations to this information in real time right then, probably in memory or in CPU. And this is where all of the data is decrypted. It has to be in plain text form or its original form, or we would not be able to perform a calculation on it. So somewhere we can encrypt up to a point, but at some point it has to be decrypted and be in a form that we can work with. Well, the bad guys love this because they know that may not be able to crack the encryption on your VPN. They certainly can't get through the encryption that's on a full disk encryption if they steal your laptop. But if I can go right into the memory where that information is not encrypted at all and just steal it out of the memory, that's what I'll do. And that is exactly what happened in November of 2013 with Target. Target is the large retailer here in the United States that lost millions of credit card numbers. Over 110. Actually, I think it was probably a little more than that, but that's a conservative number as to what they believe they lost in credit cards. They effectively put malware on the point of sale terminals at Target. So that's where when you scan your credit card, it goes into the point of sale terminal, and that's where it checks your credit card number. It performs all those transactions. The checking of the credit card number, encrypted. Where they store the information after the transaction is over, it's encrypted. All of those things are absolutely safe. The only time it was really not encrypted was on the point of sale terminal itself. So the bad guys stuck the malware, not just on one point of sale terminal, they put it on all the point of sale terminals, every single one they could find. And it sat there for months, collecting credit card information, storing the information onto a server, and literally FTPing it out of the organization onto one of their centralized servers. And that's why you can go to a number of websites and buy my credit card. No problem. You can absolutely buy my credit card on these credit card servers because I've checked. And you can even, it's very interesting how they make money from these things. They're able to really identify the type of card, the issuer, the zip code you're in. Is it a gold card? Is it a platinum card? They can really make a lot of determinations on these things and work with them. That's pretty bad. And this is very common to see on a number of different attacks. The TJ Maxx attack was a little bit different in how it works, but I agree. Fleafly in the chat says one of the best write-up really on the Target breach is at Krebs. KrebsOnSecurity.com would be the place you would go to. They've got a huge section. And when you ever want to know anything about what's happening with security, Brian Krebs is the guy to tell you about it. He has a fantastic site, and he has suffered because of it. The poor guy really does have to deal with the worst of security and the people doing security, and has had a number of very weird things happen in his life. It's all on his website. You can read all about it at KrebsOnSecurity.com. So we were asking a question after that. This is the longest answer ever. I'm sorry about that. The answer, though, when we're talking about data in use, we know that it's in the CPU and we know that it's in memory. So on our particular answers, you guys did pretty good. So CPU is E. If you answered E, 25% of you, or really 25% of the responses were E, 33% of the responses was RAM. So if you answered C RAM and E CPU, it will be absolutely correct. Well done with that one. And this is one where if you are watching this for continuing education units and you want to be able to get an hour of CEUs, you can collect a number of those that will help towards the renewal of your Security Plus certification. Simply go to the top or bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link both at the top and the bottom. Click on that and put in your name, put in that it is the October Security Plus Study Group, and put data in use. And I will know that you at least watched some of this. So I could say, yes, you were indeed here, and I will send you back an email, a digital certificate that says, yes, indeed, you must have been here. Here's your 1 hour of CEUs. Let's do another question, shall we? I have another one for you that deals with one pretty common type of thing you might run into in the world. This one deals with group policy. So the question specifically is, which of these would be the most common use of group policy controls? So this is one where you have to know what group policy is, and then you want to know how to apply group policy. So again, I take you through a multi-step question here. You really have to know those two different pieces of things and know how to do that. This is especially when you're working in very large environments. You will certainly run into group, even small environments, run into group policy. I have a little group policy here. So there's a little bit of this everywhere. And in fact, you'll see a lot of different devices, where they are security related or otherwise, may also integrate with these group policies. Some of your possible answers on this one might be, which of these would be the most common use? Would it be requiring a smart card for authentication? Would it be specifying browser SSL encryption algorithms? Would it be blocking unwanted URL access? Or would it be scheduling a daily antivirus signature download? One of these would be the most common use of group policy controls. That's another one of those things that's important about the questions they'll ask you on the exam, is they may ask you for the best, or the most common, or the most popular, or the thing that fits the best, or the first thing to do. And the answers you might get, there might be multiple answers that could be the answer, but only one of them is going to be the most common or the best. So you have to know context. This is one of the problems people have with the Security Plus exam, is if you don't have any context and they ask you for the best answer, it becomes difficult. And that's why in the exam objectives, they even tell you you really should have this much experience in security before you think about sitting for the exam, because we're going to ask you questions that apply back to context. And a lot of people think of those as trick questions, but they're not. They're to see if you really know this stuff. So let's see how we did with this one. You folks are good at answering now. We've got a number of people in the Socrative that are typing things in and figuring out those pieces. This is one where you really do get into situations where working through these can be a bit of a challenge. So let's see how we did. You can see we're a little torn on this one, trying to figure these things out. Requiring a smart card for authentication, 39% of you said that's what I would use with group policy controls. 33% of you said blocking unwanted URL access is the most common use of group policy controls. And we even had double digits. 20% said scheduling antivirus, and 10% said specifying browser SSL encryption algorithms. So which one could it possibly be? I like that advice. Like, if you're not quite sure, just go with what you think it is. And it's probably the best thing to do. I always go back on my exam. Sometimes I will think of changing an answer on my exam. And I will change it, and I'll read the question again and realize I read it completely wrong. I had it right the first time. I don't know why I changed it. Sometimes it's the reverse. So maybe that's just bad advice in general. Just do what's important. Answer it right. Answer the right question. Maybe that's the way to do it. Let's talk about group policy, though. It's not helpful at all, is it? Answer the right question. What good is this guy? Administrative policies is a good thing you would use. Group policy control, by the way, is something in the Windows operating system you would use to set up certain policies across large groups. That's where the name comes from. And this is generally something that is integrated into Active Directory, which is the directory services that are primarily used in the Windows operating systems. This is one where, especially going through and figuring out the pieces of this and breaking it down, can be very useful. So in the group policy control, there are a couple of different kinds of policies you'll run into. Some are administrative policies, where you're allowing or disallowing what a user is able to do on their Windows operating system. Can they install certain fonts or not? Can they install certain applications or not? Can they do a number of different things? Maybe only allows approved domains to use ActiveX controls without a prompt, which is a little different than URL filtering, isn't it? So let's talk about the part that is security related in group policy. There are security policies where I can specify a minimum password length. I can require someone to use a smart card for authentication. I can have a maximum security log size so the logs won't get too large. It cuts them off at a certain point, which a lot of people unfortunately make too small. You need very large log files, not small log files. The point of this is to optimize, not limit yourself, and enforce user login restrictions. And there's a number of different security policies in here. That's just a smattering of them. That's just a few of them in this list. So if we need to become more familiar with those, you need to know what those things happen to be so that you can answer questions like this one, which asks what the most common use of group policy controls might be. We know that scheduling a daily antivirus signature download is important, but that is not part of a security group policy or even an administrative group policy, at least not a common one to be considered with. Blocking unwanted URL access is usually done through a separate piece of software or hardware. That's not something that's generally done as part of a group policy. Usually that's administered at some other component within the network. Specifying a browser SSL encryption algorithm can certainly be done as part of the browser configuration, and it might be done as part of some very esoteric group policy setting somewhere, but it's not one of the most common uses of group policy because there is a very clearly written, obvious group policy that's there requiring a smart card for authentication. Now, there are, of course, many other common uses of group policy, and even some of these might have an option in group policy for you to configure it. But again, we're asking for one of the most common uses. And I guess if you think that's not the most common use, you can send me an email and we can talk about it and argue over it and figure it out. And you may have a point with that one. I'm thinking from the people that use these group policies and how you would configure them, setting up authentication is a very common thing to do. And if you're in an environment that requires a smart card, that is one of the most important things that you're going to be setting up in group policy and getting it ready to go. It's got to be useful to be able to have those there. So make sure that you become familiar with those. Make sure you work through the ideas of these pieces. This is a case, by the way, and going through these, I'm trying to design these questions so that I get a 50% of you get this right. I'm trying to make them that hard so that you can go through this list, and if you miss it, well, you've just learned something. You really don't learn anything until you screw it up, right? Until it's really a problem. So make sure you go through this list and go through the exam objectives. That's what's really going to tell you what you should do with those pieces and make sure you understand it. Well, let's look at something else that might help you understand it, because as I mentioned, on the exam are performance-based questions. And these performance-based questions are going to expect you to be able to answer things that apply to a context. We talked about this earlier. Context is everything. So knowing how to work through the details of these questions, thinking like a common, what is the most common thing associated with this? When you're setting up a VPN, what are the most common things you have to configure when setting up the VPN? Well, that's one of those when you get into it where you might want to use something like some live labs. These are labs that are set up already on the cloud, in the cloud, with the cloud, and you can connect to these from any browser and be able to run through these labs. This is brought to you by my friends at GTS Learning. I'm in this cloud-based lab right now. I just started her up. I'm turning on, I'm clicking on each one of these devices, and I'm pressing the power button. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 devices that are starting up right now in the cloud. It's taking advantage of virtualization. It's taking advantage of HTML5. I didn't have to load any software. The labs are already here waiting for me. I can click on the first section of the lab, and it takes me through task 1. You actually install a virus onto a device, and then you work through the process of what you do when a virus is on there. That's an interesting thing to step through, isn't it? This is one where it starts up all of these devices and even tells you, it gives you a little map of them right here on the screen. I've got domain controllers, Windows 7 devices. I've got even a Kali Linux device on here that will be used during the lab. So it does take you through sort of an understanding of how you can work with these things. Oh, for those of you asking for the URL, it's professormesser.com/seclabs. We'll get you there. This is something also, if I click on the domain controller that's now booted up, it's now running a full-blown Windows domain controller. This is Windows. It's not an emulation. It's not a sample. It's not a crippleware version of this. This is a domain controller. And you can do all the things that you would normally do with a domain controller. It's got the whole breakdown for all of the pieces. It's Windows, effectively. So that's very easy to work with. There's also a Windows 7 device here. I can just click between all of these. I can click the XP device. There's Windows XP. You want to get a virus? There's your Windows XP, since we're talking about viruses. Another Windows 7 device on here. And look how fast it is. I can just click between them to be able to do things. That's a regular device that doesn't have an interface on it. So it's very simple to step through the lab. Now I can go to step 1 and says, install, do this, start, run, type these pieces, and it will start putting them onto your system. You'll be infecting your system and cleaning it off in no time. What's even more interesting is you get to do this for free for an hour. So if you think this is something that you might be able to use for your Security Plus exam, give it a shot. You have all of these systems already ready to go, all of the labs ready to go, and special pricing on this as well at professormesser.com/seclabs. Pricing you can't get if you go directly to the GTS Learning site. They were able to give us a special deal right here for the professormesser.com users. So go to professormesser.com/seclabs and be able to try this Security Plus piece yourself. I think you'll like it. I like going through there sometimes and working through some of the labs so I can get some screenshots and try some different things. It's great having the lab already set up. So from my perspective, I'm even using it to do some pretty interesting pieces. And the price when you get the labs also comes with a book, also comes with sample questions, all online for $99. So a great price as well. I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for helping support what we do with these live labs. Here's a lot that when you start looking at what you need to know for the Security Plus exam, it's big. There's a ton of information there. So you're going to want to get into these labs and try it out yourself. And I like the 1 hour for free. Even if you don't end up buying it, you're able to get in and play around with some of these technologies. It's a lot of fun. I've got more questions for you. So let's go and look at what these next set of questions might be. And let me click the button so you'll see it pop into your Socrative. And now you'll see a question asking you, which of these is used to validate a digital signature? Have to know this one. Figure it out. Which of these is used to validate a digital signature? And I've got a number of options for you. Now we have to figure out how we validate a digital signature. Do we validate it? Well, we don't validate it that way. We validate it this way. There we go. Do we validate it using perfect forward secrecy? Do we use hash? Do we use public key? Do we use symmetric key or a private key? One of these is used to validate a digital signature. I stuck a couple of these in here, these encryption, cipher, hashy key things into this study group. A lot of you were asking about these. So stuck an extra one in here right at the end to try to see if I can get you to validate a digital signature. Hopefully you've validated a digital signature before. And when you validated it, what did you use to validate the digital signature? It's hard to say. There is a number of different things to think about. Don't Google. Just go ahead to Socrative.com, to the student login, to the Professor Messer room, and see if you know the answer. And take a guess. If you're not quite sure, take a guess at what you'd use to validate a digital signature. Thinking about the entire process of what a digital signature is. Think about how one is created. Think about how one is validated. So you should be able to step through that 3-step process for those pieces and break it down. I'm going to look at their live labs and see if there's a lab on digital signatures. I'm going to flip down here. Oh, there is. There's one on cryptography, PKI concepts. And you can go through the PKI concepts and go through digital signatures, or at least in encryption, and using some of the ideas behind this encryption. Digital signatures are very useful. We were talking about digital signatures in the chat room yesterday. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. We have a number of people that have answered which of these would be used to validate a digital signature. Let's see what was going on with this. Let's see. Well, we've got quite a bit of mixed pieces with that. Here we go. So we've got 40% have said a hash, 29% said public key, 17% said private key, 13% said symmetric key, and 2% said perfect forward secrecy. All right, so we are all over the place. I said I wanted a 50% passing rate on these questions. I think you got on this one. And again, Steve in the chat room again He's the one that brought this up yesterday in the chat room for digital signatures and talking about UEFI, which is the BIOS type of this. So yeah, the not really majority, but certainly the larger number said B hash. So which is it? How would you validate a digital signature? Well, these digital signatures are based on these asymmetric encryption. This is how we're able to use digital signatures. And with asymmetric encryption, you're creating a pair of keys. It's not like a symmetric key where the secret word is X. And on the other side, both people know the secret word. Okay, it's X. We know the secret word is the same on both sides. With asymmetric encryption, you don't have people using the same thing. You're not sending the briefcase with handcuffs over to the other side so that everybody has the right encryption key. You're able to send out keys that are public. They're public keys. You can send them to everybody. You want everybody to have the public key. The private key is the one you keep for yourself. Nobody sees the private key. And we don't have to share the private key for the encryption and decryption process to work. Really a remarkable set of technologies. It completely changed the way we work with encryption in computing. Incredibly important part of what we do with encryption these days. So let's talk about digital signatures. A digital signature is where you are effectively signing something, just like you'd sign the bottom of a piece of paper that says, I agree with this, and I'm going to send this over to you. But how could you confirm that the document that you're sending to somebody, that they can confirm it came from you, and secondly, confirm that nothing has changed in that document? Well, we do that by using digital signatures. Very easy to work with this. The message itself does not need to be encrypted. All we're doing is effectively putting a hash at the bottom of the document, sort of like signing your name at the bottom. Now, of course, you could encrypt it as well, but here we're signing. Let's just talk about the digital signature process. We'll make this easy. We verify the digital signature with the public key because we're signing with our private key. Remember, that's something that's very private to us, which means that nobody else would be able to sign this unless they had our private key. And ostensibly, we are the only one with our private key. So that makes it very important. But the only way to validate it really came from us is you use the public key. So let me grab James's public key. Let's look at this. Yep, he really did sign it. And this document is exactly the way it was when we had it there before. If there were any changes to the document, the signature would fail. So that hash would not be correct. Something had changed in the document, something changed with the hash, and it would fail. And we say, we did not receive the original document. Something has changed in the middle because the digital signature did not work. The only way this digital signature is going to work is if everybody's able to validate it. The only way you'd be able to validate it is everybody had the key, so you'd have to use the public key. And so if you answered in this list, 27% of you said C, public key. That is how you validate a digital signature. The digital signature itself is a hash, but we asked how you would validate the digital signature, not what the format of a digital signature is. And in that case, the public key would be absolutely correct. This is not using a symmetric key, and it's certainly not using the private key because nobody has your private key to be able to use that. So you absolutely want to use the public key. The answer is C for this one. Well, that was not a tricky question. It was an interesting set of technologies. The question itself was not tricky at all. So I do not agree with that particular characterization of my question, sir. Thank you. Nice question. Thank you so much. I put a lot of time into these questions. It was important to me, and I want you to be able to learn something from it as well. One thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned, make sure you get the exam objective. Somebody sent me a private question on a private note in the chat just before we got started. This says, I'm taking my exam next week. What do you recommend I do as a last minute study, my weekend studies, the studies that I'm going to do for the next week or so, and download the exam objectives. If you don't have the exam objectives, then you don't know everything you need to know for the exam. And people ask me, what do I need to study for my exam? What do I need to know for the test? Here is the list of everything you would need to know on the exam, a completely detailed breakdown. So don't forget about that piece. Don't miss that piece of it. And don't miss the next study group. I've got another one of these in about a month. Less than a month, actually. Normally we do these once a month, but with the holidays in November and December, I moved it up a week. So if you want to join us for the next one of these, you thought, I want to be here live, I want to participate, I want to click a few things on the screen and see if I get them right as well, you can follow us live. I do these on Wednesdays at noon Eastern time, whatever that time happens to be Eastern. I guess we'll change our clocks before November the 18th. So you can always check on the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll be able to know what the calendar is for that. It also does a comparison of where you are versus where I am, so you'll know the local time on the calendar as well when you have a look at it. There's quite a bit that I go through with these pieces, but I would not be able to do these study groups if you weren't here as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining me. There's so much to go through in these. I would not be able to have the questions and the answers without you being able to do this as well. Again, if you want to know more about my course notes, you can go to professormesser.com/securitycn. We will have, of course, more videos, and the replay of this will certainly be available on YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube, Twitter, Google+, Facebook, Instagram. I think I have a LinkedIn one. I try to put them all out there. You'll find me wherever it happens to be with those pieces. My thanks again to GTS Learning for what they're doing with their security live labs at professormesser.com/security-labs. Make sure you get your discount, your 10% discount when you take your exam by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. And again, thanks to all of you. Would not be able to do this without you. Thanks for joining us again for the Security Plus study group. If you're here live, stick around for the after show. I'll at least open the phone lines, and I'll be taking questions from the chat room as well. And we'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone. That was a big study group. For those of you in the chat room, the next study group will be different. Yeah, I make different questions every time. Yes, that'd be no fun. Maybe that's what I should do. It's the same questions every month. I'm not changing them. They're exactly the same. That would be the worst study group ever, wouldn't it? We're here again. It's the same questions. It's boring. No, I make them brand new. I usually sit down on a Monday, the Sunday or a Monday, and figure out all the questions, load up the Socrative, load up the video slides, get those things going. That's me typing. That's what that noise is. Fortunately, it's not that loud. And get those pieces going. So now I usually will just open up the phone lines or take questions from the chat room for those of you watching until my voice gives out. Let's see if I can start up the phones. I know there's a phone number on the live page, but I need to log in and do this, and I did not prep it properly. So it's called call. There we go. I log into the phones as well. It's a cloud-based service on my side. So I need to start her up and host the show. You would technically be able to call in right now, and you'll be on hold at that number. 1-855-785-RJ45 or 855-785-7545. And I need to bring up my Skypey. It's an inside joke. It's not really Skypey. Before I do this, because I've had problems in the past, some of you may be familiar, I'm going to call the nice Skype lady and see if she hears me okay. This is the gripping type of show that you get to sit through, is me checking Skype. I don't know why you're here. We'll have to figure that piece out. Hello, Skype lady. I'm going to say something into this microphone, and we're going to see if you repeat this back to me in the microphone, and then we'll know if I'm working properly. Thank you so much. Skype lady, I'm going to say something into this microphone. Yep, works fine. So now I get to call in and get the phone lines going, which we may use or we may not use. You're welcome to call. You're welcome to do it in the chat room. I'll answer in the chat room as well. No problems there. And I'll type this in.
Enter your 6.
I will. I'll type that in.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Okay. Now I can talk to you people, you nice people in the chat room. Nice job. Is Kerberos AAA? Kerberos could certainly be considered a AAA mechanism because it has all the things you would expect it to have for those three things. So yeah, usually Kerberos, LDAP, TACAX, Radius, TACAX Plus, those are AAA systems. Forgetting that technically they're protocols, but they're usually built around a whole system, a server, and other pieces dealing with AAA. And I've integrated firewalls and other devices many times to all of those different AAA devices. If you really know Kerberos and LDAP, boy, you are 99% of the way there, because so many devices integrate into Active Directory, and those are the two most popular ways of integrating into Active Directory. More people should do Kerberos, I think. Most people do LDAP. And there is some Cisco people out there that do the TACAX Plus. I get it. Usually your TACAX server will also do Radius, so they'll do Radius too. It just depends on if you already have Active Directory and Active Directory infrastructure in place. That's a good way to do it with those pieces. Yeah, I think if we look at what is recommended for the Security Plus exam, in the chat room we're talking about, do I just take Security Plus? Do I take A Plus and Network Plus first? Technically, there is no prerequisite for any of those exams. You can take any one of those exams without needing to take any of the others. There is a huge amount of networking as part of security. And so it helps a lot if you have some knowledge in networking. But there is certainly, I have a lot of people come to the site and a lot of people jump right into Security Plus, and that's the only certification they're taking is the Security Plus certification. So that's one of those where it's really up to you. I usually see this a lot with federal government. The U.S. federal government considers Security Plus to be one of the entry-level certifications that's required to work in IT for the government and for a number of governmental agencies or contractors. And so they're coming in just to get Security Plus because that's all they need for their job. They do kind of build off each other. I would say Security Plus is more of a standalone unit than the others. There's not a ton of raw networking stuff in Security Plus. There's a little bit. There's NATing and IPv4 and IPv6. So there's some, don't get me wrong, but the Network Plus is so raw network protocol-ish. Security Plus goes into port numbers and sort of an overview of things you need to know for security, and gets more into VPN and NATing. Those can be considered security type things to know. And I know NATing is not security. We can have another conversation about that. But there's certainly a way to consider looking at just doing Security Plus, and people do, and they do a fine job. And as long as you concentrate on those topics, you can absolutely pass it by just doing Security Plus. I don't plan on offering training currently on the CASP, the CompTIA Security Advanced Practitioner exam. The Advanced Practitioner just doesn't have a lot of traction yet. If there were more people asking about it, I would probably have more of an interest, but it's such a niche exam. And on top of that, it's competing with already an existing set of security exams that are out there in the world that it becomes a little more difficult. I would love a worldwide tour. That'd be a lot of fun. Get out of the studio, go see people. No plans to do one right now. My next tour will be grabbing my family and going on vacation. That will be the tour. I'm driving there, so it's not going to be Ireland, unfortunately. But I fully expect that there is a spot at the Guinness factory for me to roll up and be a tourist, and that's something I would love to do someday. I think that's fine with those pieces. You can absolutely, if you sit down and study Security Plus, you study just those objectives and go through those objectives and really understand them. That's a great way to go about studying for it. You could absolutely study without having any practical experience. These exams are the entry-level exams for those particular areas of concentration. It sure helps a lot, though, if you have some experience. Very much helps a lot if you have some experience, because you've gone through these concepts of encryption and digital signatures and VPNs and URL filtering, and if you've never done them before, you're trying to learn based on this blob of knowledge and you're just repeating the words. But if you've actually done a VPN setup, or you've worked with, you've sent me an encrypted message using PGP or GPG, and I've been able to read it and respond back to you in encrypted form, well, that's a great way to test. And you're welcome to do that. My public key is out there. So that's if you're interested in doing that, that will be your test. Your real test is go out, find my public key, send me an email, an encrypted email using PGP or GPG, and see if I can respond back to you. That would be a way you could test that. Then you have some practical experience. Then you can send me a non-encrypted mail that you've digitally signed, or I can send you a non-encrypted mail that I have digitally signed, and you can try to see if you can validate the digital signature. I'm more than happy to do that. So feel free to send those through, and we'll figure out those pieces. Very easy to do that. Let's go to these questions you folks have sent to me. That would be good to have there. It's been an interesting week for security, hasn't it? I say this every time we do a study group, it seems. There's always something security related going on. Oh, for those of you that I didn't really go into detail on the Krebs on Security site, this poor guy has just gone through craziness because he's writing about the worst of the worst kinds of hackers. He's writing about the people that have stolen the credit cards from Target. He finds those sites. He sees what's out there, and all of the other breaches that have happened since then. The breach at Home Depot, the breach with Anthem. All of these, by the way, got my data. So there's more of my data in the public now than has ever been out there because people have all this information. It's really, really a mess. What, you can't believe someone got hacked with a SQL injection? It is one of the most common methods of gaining information is SQL injection. So easy. For Krebs, he has been swatted at his house. Swatted, by the way, means that somebody called and with fake credentials, pretending it's coming from in his house, and said, holding people hostage, I've got a gun. And they send in the SWAT team into your house. What's even worse is that he already talked to the police saying this could be a thing. Don't believe the hype. And they did. What a mess. Yeah, he did do a Reddit AMA. I need to finally go back and read through it. I saw it right at the beginning, which is not the time to be in an AMA. You want to be at the end. Because I didn't have a question. I just wanted to read it. I need to go through and read that. Another one was that the bad guys shipped drugs to his house, and then called the cops that he had drugs shipped to his house. But interestingly enough, he got word about that before the drugs arrived and did talk to the police and said, people are going to be sending drugs to my house. Just wait. And it's not me. I'm telling you straight up. But see, he had to go through a whole process with the police. Like, who are you? Yeah, right. The bad guys are sending drugs. No. He really did have to go through quite a bit. But finally got to a point where, okay, you're in with us now. Let's wait for the drugs to show up. And they did. And they got a call. And that was just the craziest thing. This happens to him all the time. I don't know how he does it. Yeah, he's a huge target because he's the guy naming names. He's the guy finding these guys. He's on the underground sites. He's figuring it out, which helps us make our systems more secure, helps us understand what's going on with these breaches and who's doing them. He's getting people thrown in prison, not jail. They're going to prison because he's able to name names and find these people. Some of the folks that did the denial of service on the Xbox and PlayStation networks, they're in jail. They're in prison. They went through the process already. They're already in trouble with those pieces. So he's a bit of a hero in that regard. That he's the guy doing it and going through the process and struggling with it. My thoughts about CryptoLocker: don't get it. You'll be sorry. It is a bad one. It is nasty. And there's so many different ways, different types and variants of CryptoLocker now. We were talking in the chat room this week about antivirus and how antivirus is so pointless, it seems, because it takes so long for these signatures to get out and there's so many 0 days. It's worthless now to have signatures. So there's many next generation virus systems now that are trying to find out how to protect your system without antivirus signatures. And this is very interesting emerging technology that's already out there. People are using it because when an infection occurs, malware gets onto your system, there's only so many things it needs to be able to do to infect your system. There's a finite set of things that occurs. And and only a set of those. So instead of protecting every possible signature, what if you could just protect your internal system from those finite set of things that might be happening? And if you can do that, you don't need any signatures. A very interesting place to go with that. And there's a number of technologies out there. Type in next generation antivirus. You'll get a number of sites that will do that. I worked at Palo Alto Networks, so I was very familiar with the Palo Alto Networks. Traps is the name of that product. But there are a number of other next generation antivirus that are doing that. Traps is interesting because it integrates with your next generation firewall, and there's a cloud-based component, and very interesting on those and being able to work with it. Trying to understand LDAP versus LDAP-S. Why would somebody by default want to use LDAP without SSL? Is there any benefit to it over LDAP-S? No, there's not benefit. People just don't do it. They're lazy. They really should do LDAP-S. Now, I say they're lazy, but there is a built-in component to this as well that helps protect. Because when you're doing this LDAP, you're generally not sending a password in the clear. You're generally sending a hash over the network. So the worst thing that could happen is they get a hold of the hash if it's not encrypted. But you're right. That's just poor. That's just poor staff work, if you will. You want to really be able to encrypt as much as you can, especially an authentication mechanism. Why wouldn't you? And most of the time when you're installing an LDAP server, it has an option by default that it's going to provide secure LDAP. So why wouldn't you send it secure LDAP? I just went into a mail system that I've got configured corporately and turned off all of the in the clear mail transfer protocols. Turned off POP, turned off IMAP. You got to do, if you're going to do POP or IMAP, it's got to be over the encrypted channels. So those methods, well, I should just turned off POP in general. But, it's one of those things where I don't want it to be in the clear. I'm going to force you to do it over an encrypted channel. So that way I can be assured that if somebody is in a coffee shop and they're working on my content and they're checking their mail is going to be checked securely. So that's the real big deal for me, because I know how easy it is to go into a coffee shop, sniff the air, and the information you can find is crazy. Which is there a ranking system for the different encryptions? Not really a ranking system. There have been, because it's different. Sometimes a symmetric algorithm is much preferred to an asymmetric. Sometimes an asymmetric is much preferred to a symmetric because it's also about context. How are you sending this information? What is inside the information? Is this over a real-time stream, or is this something that's in a document? How big is the document? Those types of things are a bit of a thought process to go through. So you can't really rank them top to bottom. You generally want to decide the type of encryption you're going to use and then use the one with the highest number of bits that you can. That's really what you've been in. The scariest security situation I've been in virus hacking. There's no scary situations. It's not. That's the thing. It's the network security has this this Hollywood aspect to it that they're through the firewall. Oh, let me type some things here. Let me lock this down with the port numbers and blah. It doesn't work that way. And it's not really scary. There have been a number of times I've been in environments with customers where they've been hit with CryptoLocker, or they've been hit with a virus that really took out the entire organization. There was one, this was about 6 or 7 years ago, where McAfee introduced an antivirus update that deleted one of the Windows startup programs, the key operating system files. And so if you rebooted your computer after getting the signature update, it would not boot your system. And people had to show up with a USB or a CD-ROM at the time and install the file back onto the drive. Those are the types of situations you'll run into. There have been environments I've been in where I have met with people in a meeting and talked about, because I represented a next generation firewall company, and talked about the advantages of using this. Do you think this would be something you could use? And in some cases have been laughed out of the room. It was a very bad meeting. I don't know why people treat other people this way in business, but sometimes when you're the vendor, you're seen as somebody who is an enemy. And they said, no, we don't need your product. We're doing fine. We got everything we need here. Thank you so much with your little next gen firewall stuff. We said, okay, well, call us if you need us. You get used to that when you work in that particular field. Okay, well, buy it. If you don't, you don't. And I'm gonna go to the next thing. And they didn't buy it, and not 2 years later, 3 years later, they were one of these large companies that was hit with one of these massive breaches. And I can't say that my product would have allowed it or not allowed that particular breach to occur, but I know that if you have an opinion that nothing out there is better than what you're doing, that you're just waiting for the breach to happen. It's a very bad way to think about security. Don't do that with those. Have there been recent attacks on par with Stuxnet? We've been pretty good about worms these days. Quite honestly, there haven't been a lot of attacks like Stuxnet, or at least not that we know, right? And we're talking about government espionage. You're talking about some really bad stuff that most of the time we're not going to hear about it. And of course, the United States, Israel, and other allies are going to get together and create malware that will get into the inside of these organizations. You're just never going to hear about it. Or if you are, it's going to be kind of like Stuxnet, where it just kind of stumbled out and got in the hands of, what was it, Symantec, I think. Was it Symantec? I'm trying to recall. But was discovered by the antivirus researchers, and off it went. But that's where you get into a lot of other issues. Yeah, a lot of these, the latest hacks and the latest breaches these days are all about money. And it's all about money. It was all about money with Sony. It was all about money with Target, with Home Depot, with Anthem, with, just name them. Go to Krebs and just list them out for the ones that come in. It's all about getting dollars for this content. That's what makes the difference. And that's what's driving the bad guys today. They don't want to bring you down with a denial of service because they can make a lot more money if they can take your data. So that's where the trend is going. And now it's the malware is getting into these squishy systems. It's so easy these days to be able to work with. Yeah, CryptoLocker is a good example of that, where maybe they're not stealing your data. They're simply encrypting all of it and requiring that you purchase the encryption key, the decryption key from them so that you can decrypt that data. And you don't have a choice. If you don't have a backup, you don't have a choice. You have to pay the bad guys. Just awful. I'm not even going to get into a Bitcoin conversation because there's not a good conversation to have of it. I don't tend to have a side with Bitcoin either way, which just makes people more angry regardless of what side they're on. You're angry with me because you like it. You're angry with me because you don't like it. And I'm like, okay, I'm just watching to see what's coming of it. If I want to lose money in finance, I invest in a stock. That's the way I lose money financially. And I highly recommend that if you yourself would like to lose money, that's a great way to do it for those pieces. If you have questions about specifics on the exam or questions about a question you saw, I don't want to hear any questions about the exam itself, but if you have questions about a sample exam, you can give us a high-level view instead of maybe copying copyrighted information into the chat. Let's not do that. But I'm sure you can summarize it. That's all we're looking for is a summary for those. Here's a good question from Mauricio, who's asking about PCI. Oh boy, Mauricio. Can I get some reference lists for security compliance, such as PCI? Nope, you can't, because it's much more complicated than that. The PCI DSS is a extensive set of security standards, and there is no one thing or set of things you can go to. In fact, it's kind of odd in a way that the standard itself has some very vague areas and some other areas that are very specific but don't seem to be the right solution for the thing they're trying to protect against. So there really isn't a single reference list. There are a number of companies that would love to help you with your security compliance as it applies to protecting credit card information with PCI DSS, the data security standards. That is one where there are many great books written about it. It's one where you really have a big project and everybody's going through the project to figure out how do we make this process secure. I kind of opted myself out of PCI DSS. I sell products on my website. You pay for those products with a credit card, but I don't do any of the credit card processing. I don't store any credit card processing information. You are talking directly to a credit card clearinghouse. And in my case, I've chosen PayPal for that. PayPal also does credit card processing. And so it goes right to PayPal. It's an encrypted channel. They do whatever they do on their side because they are PCI DSS compliant. And then they just tell me, yeah, he's cool. You can let him in. Very simple to be able to do that. And being able to work through those. That's as far as I get with the PCI DSS. I did work in the world once where people are doing PCI DSS compliance. They need web application firewalls. They need regular firewalls. It's just a huge list of things that you have to go through. And some of these books can provide you with some of those pieces. In network security, who in the world is giving you an assignment that talks about a passive IDS versus an active IDS? Maybe this is one of those back in time things where we're discussing in 1990, no, it would be 2002, right? Passive versus active IDS. That's a very unusual way to describe IDS and IPS. How are they different between that and IPS? That they don't exist anymore. There's no IDSs anymore. It's all IPS. Why wouldn't you protect? I'm sure there are people that have IPS systems. I'm not sure there are. There are people that have IPS, intrusion prevention systems, not IPS systems, because that would be like an ATM machine. And they are using it as an IDS. They're not actually blocking anything. An active IDS is effectively something that's blocking it. I guess some people might describe passive IDS and active IDS as the way it's identified and what's done with it. At one time, all we had was TCP resets, for instance, and that was your active IDS, whereas an IPS is something that can sit in line and block traffic. There's many different ways to define those, but the fact that they aren't around anymore may be something that helps you along those lines. And these days, we're seeing fewer and fewer IPS. We're deciding to put that technology into next generation firewalls. So you have a firewall that does IPS and it looks for network-based viruses and it does URL filtering and it provides VPN connectivity and it's a central point where people can authenticate, has a captive portal. It does, as a client-based VPN technology. It does cloud-based virus scanning. They do everything these days in a single device. Nobody's buying a single IPS or certainly not an IDS anymore because they don't sell them anymore. I guess you could get a open source IDS and plug it in if you really wanted to play around with it. But these days it's all about stopping the bad guys, isn't it? It's not about allowing traffic through and telling you that happened. Hey, thing came through. That's one of the challenges. I did give out the CE credit, the special code word for Security Plus today, so you'll want to watch the replay to find out what that is. WatchGuard is not a good all-in-one firewall device, but thank you for playing. That's nice of you to say. I'm sure WatchGuard appreciates that, although it's not exactly true. There's certainly a large number of WatchGuard devices out there. Sure. Yeah. I said something positive about WatchGuard. There are many of them. And so they have a good reason to have a support team, the WatchGuard devices. WatchGuards are not good devices because they are old technology. They are port-based firewalls, and port-based firewalls are relatively useless from a security perspective these days. Firewall has to be smart now. The firewall has to be able to look at the entire traffic flow and be able to allow or disallow traffic based on anything within the traffic flow itself, not just allow port 80. Everything runs on port 80 or port 443 these days. And these poor companies like WatchGuard and others have tried to reverse engineer their devices into something that does it. But at the end of the day, they're still a port-based device, which limits themselves in dramatic ways. And that's why we're seeing them fall farther and farther and farther behind with what they're doing. And they're just not, I guess for what they do, they're fine. There's just other things have circumvented their technology. Not circumvented, leapt over. Much faster, much better, much stronger. And for security, that's what we want. We want something that's able to be more intelligent as it's looking at the network, not something that's just a port-based device. Okay, they are pretty. So they're pretty. There is something to be said for beauty, isn't there? In those regards. And it doesn't help, of course, that all of these companies are calling themselves a next generation firewall company, when in fact all they have is the same old stuff. It's a common story in the industry. You really you can't trust anything that you read on a website, and when you have people come in to talk about it, you only trust about half of what they say. The only real test is, let me plug it in and try these things for myself and see what other people are saying about them. That's really the best key. Find some good analysts, find some good reviews, and even that's harder to do these days. As someone who is in the industry, reviews and the review process and the nonsense around that, it can be just as depressing as trying to figure it out yourself. The industry is a weird place, and unfortunately, that people don't play fair. So you really got to work hard as an end user, as the consumer, as the one buying the equipment, to do your best amount of testing and work with those things. Finally, a good solid question: am I getting Fallout 4? Which is really the pressing question. No, I'm not. I'm not getting Fallout 4. I just don't have the cycles. My children will be getting Fallout 4. They've already told me. So they will be playing Fallout 4. I just loaded Halo 5 up yesterday for an hour or two, and already I feel like I'm behind. So it's all about time with those pieces. I've been a Diablo 3 season player right now. I kind of got off of that and did some Halo 5 yesterday and got through the first 4 or 5 sections of the campaign. Did some multiplayer, and if you're my age, there's nothing that really tells you how old you are in playing multiplayer on a first-person shooter. It is the best. If you're ever feeling too good about yourself, you're thinking, I'm eating right, I'm feeling good, finally got some things in order, my life's going well, just get into a multiplayer game with a first-person shooter, and that'll turn that all around for you, I assure you. WatchGuard. The WatchGuard firewalls. What about those firewalls? They're yet another company that got all bought up, weren't they? The industry itself is really remarkable at what it's been doing, especially the WatchGuard stuff. And really everybody's getting bought. Everybody's getting consolidated. Because they have to. The old technologies aren't working. Who was it this last week or so where Tipping Point got bought away from HP by, was it Trend? And bought for less than what HP bought them for. So they've lost millions and millions and millions over time. That's just another good example of how the older technologies they're slowly being phased out, and we're doing other things with them. It's one of those that really does come in handy, though. And these companies, some of them are starting to change. We're starting to see others build new technologies, try to keep up with some of these changes. Some of them are making bad decisions and simply buying up older technologies to kind of fill some holes. And that will work for a certain amount of time. It's certainly not an invalid business practice, but it doesn't provide you with the latest, best technologies. I'm looking at you, Cisco. Cisco's always been weak. Not always been weak on the security side, but there was a point about 7 years ago when they restructured, and they restructured into these different groups, and none of those groups were security. And their security side just floundered around for years. And then they realized, hey, wait a second, we should do security again. By that point, they were already 2 or 3 years behind and being able to work through that. So it was a little bit of a challenge for them. Now they've made some other acquisitions in the meantime. Just made an acquisition this week that they say is security. And I question the marketing of that one because they bought a company that effectively is a NetFlow reporting solution. Cisco abandoned their reporting solution a while back. Now they've realized, hey, reporting is important. It's a common theme with these poor folks at Cisco. They're so big. There's nobody steering a lot of these sections. They got a big person at the top that kind of steers the boat, but you're trying to figure out, where's my room? Where's the engine room? Does anybody know where the doctor is? They're kind of walking around trying to figure out those pieces. And on the security side, they've just struggled to build back together something that is cohesive. There's a lot of money involved. The stockholders are checking these things and they're trying to figure it out. It's an interesting story. It will be an interesting Harvard Business Review case study someday. I cannot wait to read it for those pieces. Well, with that, this is one of those where being able to have those study groups is great. I'm able to sit here and chat with you folks, but I think we've come to the end of our Wednesday study group. It's been a good one for the Security Plus. We are doing the same Security Plus, not the same, but it will be all new questions on the Security Plus study group. On what day is it? November the 18th, so that I can get all of the study groups out of the way for the month so that you can also join me and not be traveling and somewhere else with those pieces too. So that would be a good way to do it. I want to thank everybody again for joining. Would not be able to do this without you. Where did I go? There I am. I would not be able to do this without you. Thanks so much. Thanks for your support throughout the month on buying the course notes and the video products and just sending me emails and letting me know how you're doing with your Security Plus studies. I got a great message today on Facebook from somebody who just passed his exam and got a job. And I love those emails. Thank you so much for doing those pieces. I'm also in the chat room all week long, all month long. So feel free to stop in any page on the Professor Messer website and say hello as well. Thanks for joining me, everybody. We'll see you next time on the study group.